Generally, what happens when people are anticipating getting married and talking about prenuptial agreements, it becomes very, very disjointed and adversarial because each of the parties hires their own attorney. So they're in completely different planes. Collaborative life planning is a decision made by parties to work together as a problem-solving team as opposed to in an adversarial structure. So what does that look like? Generally, like I said, people hire their own attorneys. In a collaborative life planning situation, each of the parties would hire a collaboratively trained divorce attorney. There would be a neutral mental health facilitator and a neutral financial person, generally a forensic accountant. How this is different than the traditional setting is that we all work together to accommodate and achieve the goals and objectives of the parties, as opposed to fighting against each other so that one person gets the best deal. And why is this important during this phase of someone getting married? Because nobody wants to start their lives in such a stressful, contentious, acrimonious way.
Couples getting married are dealing with legal issues, financial issues, and of course, emotional issues. And we would like to think of it being one of the happiest moments of their life. They're in love, there's romance, they're planning a wedding of some sort, they're planning a future together. And then if they start working with attorneys in this adversarial way, me against you, it's completely the opposite of the space, the emotional space they want to be in. So my role as part of the team is to address the emotions and to keep it as a conversation, not a contest of who's going to win. People getting married have a transition to make. They're going from thinking about me to thinking about us. And in a collaborative life planning team approach, we're helping the couple to move plans, decision-making that they're in charge of, that works for them. It's very individualized. And it's a conversation where they have the benefit of the legal minds, the financial minds, and I'm there to manage the emotions to make sure everybody stays on the path that this couple wants us to take them on, which is joint decision-making with mutual respect and dignity, and not a contest where there's a winner and a loser.
So that's cool, taking it out of that adversarial setting. It would seem you could talk about a lot of different things that, you're kind of stuck to the same issues when you're in a normal prenup negotiation. But here you could talk about things like child rearing, even though it can't go into your prenup. I mean, what a good thing to discuss before you get married, right? What are your plans for retirement? What about savings? What about budgeting? Those kinds of things. Other benefits you can think of, Mara?
Well, Christen, as you know, as divorce attorneys, what are the hot button issues why people come to us? Unrealistic expectations of their spouses, and also undiscussed issues that were never addressed prior to the marriage, financial issues. So in order to really, enter into the marriage on equal footing, people really need to understand each other's goals and objectives. And that's what we do as divorce attorneys, family law attorneys, in terms of educating our clients as to what could be in a prenuptial agreement, what's important to be in a prenuptial agreement, and what the outcome would be without a prenuptial agreement. So we're really setting the stage for people to have more successful relationships because they're having these conversations prior.
A lot of what gets discussed in prenup has to do with money and finances. And the couple is starting to sort out how they're going to do this. And it's not just the money, it's what's attached to the money: power, respect, dignity. And so couples need to look at, and it has to be very individualized, how that's going to play out in their relationship. So they're going forward with the right foot and not just with conflict. So power and money relates to earned income, contribution to the family unit, unearned income, of course, earned income, inheritances, investments they've made that may be throwing off income that might have been investments prior to the marriage that are non-marital assets, to the extent that they were accrued prior to the marriage. That's a legal issue and an emotional issue and a power issue. So what we're doing with the couple is having them look at that and decide, how do they want to handle that? Are they looking for an egalitarian power in the marriage about money or not? Is one person have more power in status in the relationship, which can lead to conflict and distress along the way? We're wanting people to have their eyes open and have a conversation, a discussion, look at those issues with the benefit of the team of professionals to help them figure it out so they come to a meeting of the minds. Do we want my bank account, your bank account, our bank account? How do we spend the money in our bank account? And historically, there have been gender issues about, who makes more money and who can spend that money and where does my money go for? We need to look all at that and have the couple decide how they want to do it going forward.
And that's important, Sheila, what you're talking about, all the finances, whether you're in the life planning setting, in a collaborative setting, or in a traditional prenup setting, the importance of having financial experts, and in our case, in the life planning, the financial neutral. I mean, that lends itself so well to this setting. That person is there to help find what's equitable, not who's getting the most, or it's all mine, you get none, which that's what we see in a traditional prenup setting. So the importance of that financial neutral, I think, is crucial.
100%. And also tagging onto what Sheila is saying, most people don't really understand the import and impact of a prenuptial agreement and why a prenuptial agreement. What are we doing this for? And I think that one of the issues is that we need to educate people to understand that prenuptial agreements are not forms. We tailor our prenuptial agreements as to each client's particular goals, objectives, financial situations, and the ability to come in as a team and educate clients and work with a neutral forensic is twofold. One, to really understand what the finances are. And two, one of the most important aspects in entering into a prenuptial agreement is full and fair financial disclosure. Okay, that is, being represented by an attorney and having full and fair financial disclosure, really flushing it out and have both people understand and being on the same page. So it's of unbelievable benefit. And I think where someone like Dr. Furr comes in is the communication. People equate a prenuptial agreement with, if he really loved me, if she really loved me. It doesn't really have that much to do with it. You can't conflate emotions with the reality of what life is. 50% of marriages end in divorce. And hopefully for our clients, they could put the prenuptial agreements away in a drawer. But God forbid there is a divorce. They don't want to leave it for a judge who knows nothing about you and your children to decide the outcome of your life and how your money is disposed of. And, every family is different. Are we talking about someone who this is a second marriage and there are adult children and there are concerns about inheritance? Are we talking about someone where it's a first marriage and they're both starting out in life, but one of the parties stands to inherit a lot of money, or there are trust assets involved? There are so many nuances involved in this. And emotions happen to get in the way. And we've had, I'm sure, Christen, you've had this too, many cases that have fallen apart because attorneys have not addressed the emotional issue of it and really getting behind the goals and objectives of each of the parties and just really only looking at the law. There's so much more than the law that should be involved in this process.
And by falling apart, you mean the parties end up not getting married.
We've all had those experiences in our offices, as you say, sad to see. I'll work with couples who are at the beginning of a new relationship, and they come in and they earnestly want to talk about how to do it. And they have feelings about things. And we've been talking about money, but the feelings about things may also have to do with how to incorporate extended families or children from a prior relationship. So many times when I'm working with a couple, at any point in the age span, I might say, as Mara brought up, it was so obvious to me, boy, I wish I had an attorney in the room. Boy, I wish I had a financial person in the room, because there's so much overlap between the emotions and the legal decisions and the financial decisions that people have to make. And I would help them with the emotional piece, but there was this other huge piece was missing. You talk about inheritances and children and all of that, maybe old alimony payments that can create a huge emotional problem. Well, what do you mean she's getting all that money and there's less for our family? But one of the very common things we see in today's world is people are getting married older. Lots of people have been in school longer, they're starting their careers, and maybe they're 30-something when they're first getting married. And at that point in their lives, they may well have accumulated some of their own personal resources, investment money, 401ks with the companies that they're working with. And those things need to be addressed. They may not be equal. There may be an imbalance in those resources, but how do you create an equanimity in the relationship? How do you do decision-making going forward? Does more money mean more power? Or is there a way to address that? Because we're looking to help these couples get off on a good future. And so we need to address all that scary stuff, that stuff that's adversarial and contentious. We need to help them address that, and then it's done, and then they can move forward. It's an incredible process.
It is, and it makes so much sense. And, I think the word collaborative throws people off. It doesn't have to be touchy-feely. It makes sense. Collaborative means problem solving and working together, not against each other. And who wants to start their marriage working against someone else, against their soon-to-be spouse? They want to move forward in a partnership and really understand and be able to problem solve together.
What an important skill to learn prior to your marriage, how to problem solve or dispute resolve, right? I mean, disputes and problems are going to arise. It's just going to happen. It's for better or worse. How do we handle the worst?
We think about it not just in terms of the final document that gets signed, but the process itself, which is an opportunity for learning. When you have mentors around you to help you sort it out when it gets a little bit rocky. So couples learn how to talk to each other, how to talk about the tough stuff, the sensitive stuff. Are we going to be having dinner every Sunday night at my family's house? My parents are used to that. Or, I have children and I need to plan for their college education. Even though we're going to start our own family, I have to allocate money to the family that I still have responsibilities and affection for, even though I'm not still married to that spouse. So they're very complicated issues with not rights and wrongs. But the goal is to have the couple address it, learn how to talk to each other, have the benefit of professionals in the room with them to work that through so they can reach decisions where they walk out of our office holding hands, not glaring at each other and scowling at their attorneys, which is the stories I hear so often.
It could be a very stressful time for people, families coming together, wedding planning, all that. Even though it's happy, it's also very, very stressful. And imagine having a team supporting you and helping you through the process. And, I think a lot of people probably are thinking, oh, isn't that overkill? Well, it's really not overkill. And by and large, I believe, because I've done a lot of prenuptial agreements over the years, and I've also done collaborative, that it can be a less expensive and less time-consuming process because it's comprehensive. And we don't have all these moving pieces. This person has their forensic, this person has the forensic, and people are fighting against each other. And you have the benefit of the neutral facilitator who is really bringing everything together and leading the charge to an ultimate resolution, which is really important. It's a very, very beginning, middle, and end process. It's very targeted. So it's efficient and it's more expeditious. And in turn, by and large, less expensive.
Financial planners oftentimes tell the story that when they meet with a couple, that one person does all the talking and the other it doesn't participate and may not have the same financial resources coming into the conversation. But it becomes very apparent it's not a partnership, and a marriage is a partnership, and the couple needs to figure out who has what roles and what responsibilities and what say in the partnership. And it's not just about whose paycheck at the end of the week is larger than the other. A good financial planner is going to try to get there to be some balance on that scale and have the non-participating person speak up more. That's one of the things that we address with a collaborative team. We're keeping an eye on that We're keeping an eye on, is there a power balance or a power imbalance? Because if there's a power imbalance, we know that that's going to create problems going forward in that relationship. And it doesn't mean everything is equal, but stature and respect and decision-making, they have to figure out a way that both people feel they have a say and have dignity. Otherwise, those are the relationships that wind up in that 50% of failed marriages. Right. So we're trying to, instead of prenups breaking up relationships before they get started, we're trying to give people a good footing so they can go forward and have a successful relationship. So they feel that it's time and money well spent.
And also, part of the process is really educating and advocating for our clients. Very often people feel pressure to enter into prenuptial agreements, unfortunately. And I think that if there's education in the process in terms of really understanding that it's not a take it or leave it kind of situation, that there are variables and shades of gray within this, as opposed to being adversarial about it, then the marriage has a better chance of happening than not. The other thing I will say is that very often we see those shadow people, the mothers, the fathers, the adult children. And I think that, that's also cause for many marriages not to happen and prenups falling apart. And I think in the collaborative process, we could address those issues. And if everyone agrees, we could bring those people in.
So I was just thinking the same thing. You beat me to it, Mara, about the idea of how to bring in those outside voices, because they're there. We can't pretend they're not there. And how can we do that? Well, we actually can involve them in the process if the couple wants to, and if everybody on the team agrees to. In the collaborative world, we have what we call family specialists, sometimes child specialists with children, but really the same concept. And that's the idea of, yet there could be potentially another neutral who actually can talk to those other people. You mentioned adult children who are stakeholders because they're worried in this second marriage about my inheritance and what was planned, or the old alimony payments that, my mother is still supposed to get, all those kind of things. And that can create an undercurrent for the couple and for their future life planning. So we can bring them into the process, have them have a voice, as long as everybody agrees. And that's not to gang up things and have there be more people on one side, because we don't think that way. It's not about sides. It's about, let's deal with what is, what's real, what is the underlying issues and concerns and noise in the system. We need to deal with it, bring it out there for the couple to take a look at so they can decide how they want to deal with that.
We're giving couples the keys to success, to a successful resolution, because traditionally, when we do prenuptial agreements, someone makes an offer and the other person says, oh my God, how could they make that offer to me? What are they thinking? The mother said it, the father said it, there's all this banter. We don't start in that way with an offer. We start in the collaborative process by understanding everyone's goals and objectives. And we take it from there. We start at a level playing field.
And we don't so much care about the party's interests when we're in the adversarial setting. We care about what their assets are, right? What the liabilities are, who's making how much money. So we step away from what's really important here. What matters to you? Why are you asking what you're asking for? What about mediation? How is this different than a mediation? Couldn't they go to mediation and look at interests?
So mediation, as we traditionally think about it, is an arm of litigation. And if we're in a litigation mindset or an adversarial mindset, if there's a mediator going back and forth between two sides, they're still negotiating from their own perspective, from their own wants. This is what I want, and my lawyer is pushing for me to get what I want so that it's a win. Mediation is still an adversarial process. In collaboration, we're looking at the totality and we're looking at the underlying needs of interest of both. And they both have a voice. Both are important. And when we consider those, then we can option build around how to come to possibilities in option building. And then the couple decides what works for them. But of course, it needs to be within the law, and there are attorneys there to make sure that the client's interests are being heard and addressed, and so that they're making good decisions, because clients generally don't have the legal perspective of, if they're signing a legal document that's going to take them forward, they of course need and want and should have the benefit of legal representation. It's just the way it's done. The process is different from litigation and mediation that's based in litigation.
Mediation tends to be like a one-time event, right? And collaboration is the entire process. Mediation, you've got a settlement facilitator who's most often a lawyer, maybe a paralegal. Rarely do we have a psychologist involved or a mental health professional helping us to facilitate settlement. And Sheila, your role, you stay on, you're supporting the entire time, right? This isn't this one-time event. Let's sit down for a few hours or a lot of hours and see if we can get the agreement in place. This is supporting over time with them.
Even if there's multiple meetings, and generally one would expect there would be, even in that interspace between actual meeting, I'm available, because the emotional issues oftentimes are what drives people's decision-making. And we know that when emotions are high, cognition is low. If people are upset or angry or hurt or any intense emotion, you just don't think as well. We all know that. So, the role of the psychologist or mental health professional in the case is to deal with those emotions so they're managed, so the person can think well and make good decisions for themselves.
And you're essential to the process, Sheila, because you keep the process on task and you make sure that we're efficient and everyone is communicating respectfully. So I think that the mental health person is essential. People say, oh, we don't need therapy. This is not a therapeutic process. It's really, Dr. Furr really helps people communicate effectively and respectively. And that goes for the professionals as well. Because as attorneys, we're advocates. We're still acting as advocates. We're still acting on behalf of our clients, but we're coming in from a different way. We're trying to understand everyone's goals and interests. It's like the orange story that we have. Everyone wants the orange, right? And we need to understand why the husband wants the orange and why the wife wants the orange. Can they both have the orange at the same time? And we come to discover that, yes, the wife might want the juice and the husband might want the rind, and it's a win-win situation. And that's what we do in the collaborative process very, very often. And that's why it's very important to understand everyone's interests and goals and where they're coming from.
I had a case one time where we were in the litigated setting, the adversarial setting, and my client didn't really want the prenup, right? And the soon-to-be husband did, and I got the offer, right? The first draft, and it was, he keeps everything, she gets nothing. She was employed, she was an attorney, and she made a decent living. But I'm like, what if you decide to stay home with the kids if you have children? What, you're just getting nothing? What, we want to just at least think about some of these things. And, it was a very adversarial setting. We were at least able to negotiate something fair and not completely one-sided, but we came to the signing in my conference room, and they were, the resentment, like in her eyes, and it was palpable. And my paralegal came in to sign as a witness, and we walked out to make copies, and she said, "Are they really getting married?" Right. And I said, well, if they do, they are really getting divorced, is my best guess. It was so sad for them to start off, that way. And those are the kinds of things that we don't like to see and don't see in the collaborative setting.
And maybe that didn't need to happen. Sometimes people say, well, maybe they should never have gotten married. This is the way it is. But we've seen many times where it was the process that was destructive, and that there was a hope that this couple could talk to each other in a way that they could figure it out and come away feeling that they were heard, that their needs were considered, that they learned how to talk to each other on stuff that's tough. And that gives them a good foundation for their marriage. And actually that marriage may have better footing and may be more successful because they've put in the work that it takes to become married. Getting married isn't a moment in time, we say in technology, it's a process of learning how to dance together, learning how to live together, learning how to make decisions together. And we do that in collaborative work. And it's really for us, the synergy of the team. I can talk with couples about these issues in my office, but I'm missing huge pieces, the legal piece and the financial piece. So it became so obvious to me after years of working with couples in just my office that this is an incredible opportunity for couples to look at the whole package and to go into their marriage in a much healthier way.
I just had a case very recently where very, very contentious, and it was a prenup. They weren't even married. They had the venue, they bought a house together. They were looking forward to their lives, and it was like the Hatfields and the McCoys. And basically what happened was that I suggested to my client that she go to therapy with her soon-to-be husband. And they did, and they didn't end up getting married. And I think that they would have gotten married if it would have been a more collaborative global process where we're all together and it wasn't so disjointed. So it's very, very difficult for people to really embrace the fact that, prenuptial agreements are, becoming more and more common for a variety of reasons. And they're all very, very different. A prenuptial agreement could just address one issue, and it's the inheritance issue. And people say, well, what do I need if it's just the inheritance issue? Because there are so many nuances to it. What happens if part of the inheritance goes into a jointly owned property? Does that person get a credit? What about the appreciation? What about any income that emanates from that? So there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed. And to the extent that we could address them all together and have the support of a team, it's much, much better.
You really need the lawyer in the process if this is something that one can handle just in a counseling session, because you're going to think of things that the couple's not going to think of, nor is the therapist going to think of. Legal things down the road, the kind of things you're mentioning, that where it becomes complicated when people start mingling monies, whether they've earned the monies during the marriage or they've inherited it or it was a gift. Most people just don't know about all this. And so the attorney is essential. You can't just go to a therapist and say, well, we agreed to this and that, and we want you to write it up. And it's a legal process. There must be attorneys in there to guide the conversation so that the appropriate issues are addressed.
And I think that, in the event of divorce, it's like even collaborative in divorce. When you have a judge or someone who knows nothing about you and your family make a decision on your behalf and you lose control, there is more of an opportunity for people to be contentious and adversarial at the end of the process. Here, if people are working together, the likelihood of someone trying to set aside the agreement at the end of the day is much less, because each of the parties were vested and participated in this agreement and in the decision making, which is so important.
We have an expression that about getting to yes. In a collaborative approach, we're guiding the couple to get to a point where they both can say yes. In a contentious prenup that may get signed, it's not a mutual decision commonly. It's somebody feels they got more and somebody feels they got less. And the attorneys are guiding that kind of conversation. In collaborative, the attorneys are guiding the couple to get to yes, where both people feel that this was a productive and valuable process. It's put them in a good place to go forward with their marriage. And so it really requires a paradigm shift in the attorneys away from a litigious adversarial way of approaching this to thinking about, how do I guide my client? How do I educate my client in the law? Does my client understand the issues up ahead? But I haven't left them in rubble. I've left them with a footing so that they can build a future together. And it's a very gratifying process for all of us professionals who work in the collaborative world, that we leave our clients in a better place, we hope, than when they came to us. We figured things out with them. They've made decisions for themselves. But at the end of this, it's not at all uncommon for our clients to want to go around the room and hug all of us, even their spouse's attorney. We've lived that story.
I think it's important to note that this process is designed and works for anyone, right? I mean, we've got first-time marriages, young couples coming in, but even second marriages, third, fourth marriages. There's a lot to think about. Maybe they have adult children that we need to think about. People with inheritance and trust funds, people without a whole lot of money. It's not necessarily that you're planning for what you have today, but let's plan for what you might have in the future.